Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this Yovna the podcast, Yovna the Ageless podcast series. And I'm so excited to have Verne Verona with us today. Before I go ahead and introduce Verne, I would really, want to, let you know that when I started my macrobiotic journey, I mean, amongst one of the known people who I really came across that should be read about or heard about was Verne, and I've really grown in my macrobiotic journey, reading his books and listening to him. And he is such a such full of knowledge. So before we actually move forward with my questions, I'll first introduce Vern, and then we'll move on to the questions. Vern Verona is one of the most energetic and dynamic health educators in the US. For about 45 years, he has been highly sought after, internationally renowned speaker and consultant on health, fitness, and motivation. Verne is the author of international bestsellers, Nature's Cancer Fighting Foods. That's more about healing cancer naturally, and it's also used as textbook with a lot of academic health and wellness institutions. And his second book is Macrobiotics for the Dummies, which is about it's about everything about macrobiotics the easy way. So Verne, all okay? I mean, in the sense, am I saying all okay? You're laughing at the introduction that I'm giving, or if you would want to add something else to it.
No, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
I
So
always
over
laugh.
to you.
I always laugh at the word dummies. It's just
Uh,
it's their
it's oxymoron.
brand.
It's
Yeah.
oxymoron. Yeah. Great. So over to you. Well, help us. Let us know about yourself. How did you, from being a sugar addict to being the one of the most sought after health educators in the US? How did the journey
I
happen?
wasn't really a sugar addict. I never used that word really, but I loved sweets.
Mm-hmm.
And as a kid, I got heavily into sweets. And when I was in school, um, most of my friends in Los Angeles, when I moved to Los Angeles from New York as a teenager, were doing drugs. And I remember, I was doing chocolate, they were doing drugs. And I remember a friend telling me, this is great, it'll really space you out. And I thought, I'm already spaced out. So I really was not very attracted to that. But yeah, I did battle with sweets for a long time. I grew up in a Jewish household where, everything was chocolate and sweets and cookies and things like that all the time. So for me, it was just, it was a matter of an evolution of first getting into fasting with Paul Bragg, one of my first teachers, and then getting into sort of a raw food fruitarian kind of a movement,
Mm-hmm.
which just made me tired and very weak. And I was a runner, so I was running long distances, and that was difficult because I didn't have the energy I needed. So I experimented a little bit here and there, and I read a book about macrobiotics. I just by myself. I bought it in the store, and I thought this sounds great. This sounds really, but I couldn't get any of the food, and it sounded so weird. It sounded so foreign. That was appealing to me, but I remember thinking like, where do I get this stuff, and what is Kimpera, and there's so many Japanese terms. And then I met a high school buddy of mine who was like my idol, and in school, and I met him outside of school one day, and he was on the beach, and he had kind of flipped out. He grew his hair really long. He had really bad skin, and he was doing drugs. And about 6 months later, I ran into him in a health food store, and he was eating bread out of a bag. And I was
Mm-hmm.
walking around, and I had read Arnold Ehret, and I said, Jack, that's really mucus forming food. He said, Macrobiotics, man. And I remember thinking, oh, wait a second, that book I had. So I connected all of that, went to the Kushi house in LA. Michio Kushi, one of the teachers, had a big mansion that they were renting, and about 30 people living there. And there was one person teaching, and I moved in and started studying really diligently. I was 19 years old, I think, 19
Oh
years old.
wow.
Um, and I'd already been doing, vegetarian since I was 15. So I was really focused on learning as much as I could. And one night, the lecturer did not show up, and we had all these people that were coming and waiting for this lecture. And he was just a no-show. And the woman running the house said, would you like to lecture? I said, well, yeah, of course. So, and I had been memorizing Michio Kushi's material. So I went up there and I just gave a Michio Kushi talk verbatim.
Mm-hmm.
It was fascinating because um, people had a lot of questions, and I don't remember what I said, but they appreciated it, and I really got hooked on the idea of, you know, learning nutrition in a way that was different than I had learned it earlier. And macrobiotics was pretty out there at the time. So I started teaching, and I continued to teach for years, and eventually moved to Canada, taught in Canada, did a lot of media, started the way I was able to teach legally in Canada was to teach shiatsu because
Oh,
the laws were
okay.
very strict about giving dietary advice at the
Mm-hmm.
time. This is in the 70s. So I started in Shiatsu Institute, North American Shiatsu Institute. And that gave me a cover to teach nutrition because when I would teach nutrition, when I would teach shiatsu, they'd say, "Well, why do I have pain here?" And I'd say, "Well, the reason, might be due to blah blah blah." So I got more into doing that, and eventually I let the shiatsu go, and I just started teaching nutrition. And
Mm-hmm.
decided I needed to study, and I moved to Boston and studied with Michio for several years. But I was impatient. I was young and I was very entrepreneurial. And I decided to get out there and start teaching myself. So I did. So I went out and did posters and started teaching. And then I got my head handed to me because I thought I knew so much. And I realized I didn't know anything because I had physicians coming to my seminars and saying, "What are you talking about?" I was making energetic references and using yin yang, our terminology and archaic Chinese terms. And people were just like, "What the hell?" I mean, I was traveling all around the country, small towns.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized I need to make this real world if I'm going to keep doing it. I need to make it so it's understandable. And that's what I've been doing for the past, 45, 48 years, actually. I wrote a book in the early 2000s, and the book is a popular book. It sells consistently. It's not really about
Mm-hmm.
cancer, it's about
Okay.
macrobiotics, essentially, without the terminology. And at the same time, especially the new edition in 2014, where I talk about what is a self healing personality? What are the characteristics of somebody who really can heal? So, as a result of doing that, I did a Dummies book a little later on. The Dummies book was an opportunity for me to take macrobiotics and say, let's look at this as a multicultural template. Let's look at this. Let's look at the cultures of India and what Indians traditionally ate. Let's look at the American Indian culture. Let's look at traditional Spanish culture. Because the more I studied and the more I traveled around the world, I realized every culture was really a grain culture and a vegetable culture, and very few cultures did not eat meat. I mean, mostly all cultures ate some kind of animal protein, but the percentage was very small. It was almost like a condiment. It was never a mainstay. Only in America
Yeah.
did it eventually become, and it enlarged like that. So my issue with vegetarianism, I am vegan, but I am supportive of people who want to eat animal protein in that I know when they start doing this and they start doing some of the energetic practices, eventually they're going to be more sensitive and they're not going to want to eat as much animal protein, especially when it comes to cravings. Because when I have anybody that has a craving for sweet, I always have to stop animal protein. If you stop animal protein, that's one of the major issues for sweet cravings. And then,
Oh,
of course, there's
that's
all the
that's a revelation. Yeah, I mean, because
yeah,
in my practice, I come across a lot of people who want to stick to their non-veg portion, but also want to get rid of sugar cravings. So,
right. When you say want to stick to, I love that because when people
mhm,
say I don't want to let go of animal pride. Well,
mhm,
I always approach it differently. I don't say because everybody thinks if you say I'm going to recommend you eat vegetables, blah blah blah, they're going to say they think forever. And
mhm.
the best thing to
Exactly.
the best thing to do is to say, look, you need to try an experiment. And the experiment's going to give you an understanding of what will work for your body because I really can't tell you what to do. So my suggestion is let go of animal protein for a little while. If you can't, then you must. Because if you can't, you're a slave to it. And there
Mhm.
goes your freedom. So yes, you need to experiment and see how you feel. Then you could add it back if you want, no problem, which is a big lie because if you start eating this way, and you lower and lower and lower animal protein, you really won't want it and or need it to the degree you think you do. So today, my argument with animal protein is on frequency and on volume. That's the real big issue for
Yeah. So
animals.
I'm sorry, I'm cutting you there, but I have a question here. Like,
Yeah, please.
considering the way awareness is happening, a lot of people are coming up creating awareness about, what animal
Yeah.
protein can do to you. I assume a lot of people are already aware, right? And they know if they're consuming it somewhere, leaving it might give them better results, but still they're not able to do it. Is it habitual, or is it the cravings, or what is it that's behind that psychology?
There's a lot of things behind it. It's not any of it. It's all of it. It's genetics. It's habit. It's availability. It's taste. It's also really the larger issue, honestly, is it's their life, the degree of their
Hmm.
life. If they're passionate and they have a real sense of meaning about their life, they're doing things they want to do, they're out there, they're enjoying life, they're engaging with others, then it's not so difficult for somebody to do an
I, I
experiment.
I resonate with that. Yes, I
Yeah, they're
mean
not
I absolutely resonate.
yeah, they're not as attached to it. But if you get somebody and they go, no fruit, you say wait, no fruit. If I say somebody has a blood sugar management problem and I want to say I would like you to go easy on, but there's so much vitamin and mineral. I'll say wait.
Exactly.
I'll say wait. I said, and I'll take something like let me see. I'll take just a
Mhm.
disc. All right, so I have a little disc here. So let's say I have a
Okay.
disc. This is a rock, and let's say that
Okay.
little white section represents the minerals in an apple. Great.
Hmm.
Apple's a source of minerals to some degree. What's the rest of it? It's sugar. And that
Hmm.
sugar makes this mineral ineffective. Here's a better way of explaining it. Molasses is a great example of this. A lot of people will suggest, people are nutritionally oriented, they'll say, I have molasses because molasses has minerals in it. But if you do the research on molasses, you've got 86% sugar, 10% water, that's
Yeah.
96%, 4% minerals. So that reminds me of four guys going into a bar to look for a fight and 86 guys getting ready for a fight. It's not going to
So are
happen.
we saying
You
that
understand?
when it comes to fruits,
Right.
when
But
it comes to fruits, the
wait. I want to be sure you get it. Do you understand what I'm saying about the sugar? It's like
yeah, I get
is
that.
overwhelmed. The sugar overwhelms any goodness that you're going to get from the minerals. So that's the real issue is if you're thinking that you're eating something because it has a certain mineral status, you have to look at how much other aspect there is to it. How
And
much
that's quite a revelation to me, and that's why
right?
what I wanted to ask was, like, if we look at the concentration of minerals, what you're saying in that fruit is quite less as compared to the entire sugar content that fruit may be having, right?
They
So
should be
but we know, yeah, but we know that minerals are important. Okay, so how do
critical.
we create that balance? How do we
You
balance
find
that
other
then?
sources of minerals that are non-sugar sources, like green vegetables. People do not eat green vegetables. There's a doctor in the States. His name is Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. And
Hmm.
Dr. Esselstyn is from the Cleveland National Clinic,
Okay.
Cleveland Clinic Cleveland Medical Clinic in Ohio.
Okay.
And I've had friends that I've sent to him for consults who had really serious heart conditions. And you know what he
Okay.
recommends? He recommends greens 3 times a day. 3 times a day, a
Wow.
bowl of greens. He's firm on it. And he yells at people, no oil, no oil, no. I have something to say about oil in a minute, but
Mhm.
he's really down on oil for extreme cardiac conditions. If they're not a structural condition, like a valve that's disordered or something like that, which requires surgery, for cardiac conditions in general, um, you need to make sure that you are. Wait, I just lost my train of thought completely.
No problem.
For cardiac conditions, you need to make sure that you are taking minerals. We need minerals as a source,
Hmm.
but sugar can make your bloodstream much more, not your bloodstream, but your body fluid more acid. And
Acidic.
here's the
Okay.
real problem. If you look at the internet and you look at information, you see a lot of information about acid and alkaline. 90% of it, minimum, maybe 95% of it, is from information from Dr. William Hay from the 1930s. It's old, antiquated information. 80-20
Okay.
raw, and lemons are alkaline, and this and that. Not true, because the way they used to figure it out is they would burn a fruit, and when they
Hmm.
burn the fruit, they analyze the ash content. So when you burn a lemon, you burn the sugar. Now you're left with acid content that's alkaline. So it makes you deductively think, oh, great, lemons are alkaline, but not
So
really.
what is the new understanding on this then?
There's really no new understanding because it's not an area that's researched. It's just an area that people are arguing about with different information that's from the same source. I like
Okay.
I like Herman Ihara's information about acid and alkaline, but in his books, for me, it was far too complicated the way he structured it. So one of the ways I like to explain it is if you see a scale, let's see a scale here. Wait, I've got something I could use. Here, let's use a pen. So if you see a scale like this, all right,
Mhm.
on one end of the scale, let me get something that's not marked. Okay, so on one end of the scale, you have high acid food, such as sugar. Okay,
Mhm.
breakdown of sugar, strong acid. Meats contain alkaline minerals, but meats also contain acids. Meats contain minerals in the form of salts. So when you eat meat, you're getting the benefit of the mineral. So in macrobiotic terminology, which is really confusing, they call it more yang. But the truth
Mhm.
is, meats eventually become, through urination and through perspiration, they become acid. It's protein breakdown is acid. It
Yeah.
becomes nitrogen waste, sulfuric acid, phosphoric acid. All those acids are generally they make your body fluid acid. Your body fluid, you have about 10 gallons of body fluid. We're walking around with all this body fluid. Take something really, if I eat a big chocolate cake, that's real strongly acidic. What happens inside my body is it doesn't become acid in my blood because my blood instantly creates minerals from different buffering systems,
Yeah. Yeah.
kidneys, from the liver, from the spinal fluid, from the gallbladder fluid, from the actual bile mass, from the bones, your largest source of minerals. And that relaxes, that neutralizes the acids so you can function. But so the blood stays alkaline. So when people say
Mm.
acid blood, they don't know what they're talking about.
Mm.
You got
Right.
to be really careful because you lose credibility when you're talking to science people. Because any scientist that's done any physiology study knows that the blood is never acid unless you are
It cannot be. Yeah.
highly acidic, and then you'll die because it's very sensitive. So yeah, you have to understand it's the body fluid and the body fluid bathes the cells. So you're in a constant state of bathing the cells in an acid solution. So one of the major signs of acidity is inflammation or any condition that ends in itis, itis, like
Yeah.
gastritis, diverticulitis, sinusitis. You know,
Arthritis.
means inflammatory. If it's inflammatory, the first thing you look at as a consultant is where are you getting strong acids from? Oh, I see you're drinking beer every night. I'll say to clients sometimes, I'll say, so you're not taking any sweet? No, I have no sweet in my diet. I don't eat any sweet. How are they getting their sweet? How are they getting their acid? They're getting it from alcohol. So and
Mm.
that's really an issue. So when you look at dietary records, which is really critical, I ask for a week dietary record from clients, a whole week, and I also ask for things like how was your day, stress level, cravings, your activity, how was your sleep in the morning, how did you get up, did you jump up? That's a good sign of a good balanced condition. If you get out of
Mhm.
bed and you feel like a truck ran you over, not so good. You have to think about what you ate and how physically active you were the day before. So it can be very confusing. I like to really simplify it because at this point people start getting cross-eyed.
Mhm.
So tell me your question, and I'll and I'll give
Yeah.
you a
No,
larger view on all of it.
definitely. So, I'm just lost in what you're saying because a lot of revelations are happening to me also right now. But I just picked up one of the questions regarding the green leafy vegetables, which you just mentioned. Okay.
Regarding green
There's
vegetables. Okay.
green
Okay.
vegetables. Yeah. So when we are saying that we are trying to substitute our minerals from green vegetables, there's also a controversy which is quite commonly heard these days, which is about the anti-nutrients in green leafy vegetables, right? Like oxalates. So,
Right.
what's your take on that? What's your take on
Well,
that? I
it's
mean,
it's very valid. If you have kidney stones, don't eat Swiss chard. I mean, there are certain vegetables that have oxalates, and the oxalic acid content is high, and you have to be careful of some of those. Not a lot. but some.
Mhm.
If you have a thyroid problem, there's certain vegetables that might aggravate you. But generally
Yeah.
speaking, more localized or seasonal vegetables, which doesn't mean you should never eat vegetables out of season, but generally speaking, it's best to eat more seasonal, are healthier. And mineral sources is not just from green vegetables. Mineral sources also is from grain, whole grain.
Mhm.
From sea vegetables. Sea vegetables are really important. I've been eating sea vegetables every day for 40 years, easily.
Wow.
I a little bit, just a little bit, but I
Mhm.
eat it consistently.
Okay.
I think they're really important for people. Dulse, especially, not so much the Japanese, but some like dulse, some of the forms of
Mhm.
nori, some of the moss. They're great sources. But if I want to go back, if you look at traditional cultures around the world, they all ate in a very similar way. They had a main food, staple food. These are some of the principles of macrobiotics.
Yeah.
They had
Yeah.
a main food, a principal food. A meal was not a meal without these foods. And that principally was grain. And in my opinion, it's also vegetables. So those are principal foods. Secondary foods are foods that supplement your main foods, like beans or sea vegetables, or even fruits, moderately, depending upon the individual.
Mhm.
People often say, well, what's wrong with fruits? There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, it is a sugar source. If you tend to be spaced out a lot, fragmented in your thinking,
Mhm.
tired, fruits, not a good choice for you to eat a lot of. So it's about what the uniqueness of the macrobiotic philosophy is to understand more about your own conditions so that you can figure out what would be suitable for your needs. I think generally
Right.
we all have the same physiology, so we all really need similar foods. And I believe those are, we need a source of fiber. Where do you get fiber
Mm.
from? It's not bread, it's from the whole grain. What's wrong with bread? People say, well, what's wrong with bread? And I'll just say, there's nothing wrong with it, and it's great for texture. We are also, we eat by texture. So sometimes
Yeah.
you open the refrigerator door, and you just look and you don't know what you want. You're looking for a texture in many cases. What kind of texture? You could be looking for something chewy, something watery, something creamy, something
Yeah.
crunchy.
Crunchy.
When you have chop suey in a Chinese restaurant, if you ever had chop suey, it's kind of gooey, massive vegetables. They always give you these dry noodles, and I used to think like, what is that about? And I remember the first
Mm.
time I ever had it, my mother said to me, "You take the noodles and you squeeze them, you break them up over your food, you mix them in." I thought that was kind of fun, but it was so nice to get a gooey mouthful, also have a bit of crunch there. So we eat by
Crunch. Yeah.
eat textures are really important. People don't understand that. Tastes are really important. There are different green. Okay, that's fine. Good source of nutrition. But greens tend to be bitter. Like broccoli can be sweet, but they tend to be bitter. So there are several different tastes associated in nutrition
Yeah.
with general foodstuffs, and those tastes in America are salty, sour, sweet, bitter, and pungent. In India, there's another extra one. It's an extra pungent because Indians love spice.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
my thing is understanding if you have if you make greens, put a pinch of salt in them. Put a little squeeze of lemon juice in them. Now you have bitter, salty, and sweet. And guess what? It's more
Yeah.
satisfying because you have a variety of tastes. So we need to learn some essential stuff like that because it makes eating more appreciable and it makes it more digestible, specifically. Um, I want to segue just in a second, for a second here, to tell you something that's
Mhm.
pertinent to your culture. I really admire. Um,
Mhm.
I've studied a lot of different cultures. In 2006, with investor capital, we went to Hawaii with a film crew I organized, and we shot a movie about disease reversal. We took 28 people who had various kinds of diseases, not extreme diseases, like they had diabetes, which could be extreme, of course, but diabetes, some
Mhm.
arthritis. Um, a couple of people had eating disorders, and we fed them for 28 days, 21 days. Actually, we extended it, but it was for 28 days we fed them. We did blood work before, we did blood work after. We had a medical team to help me and a very established doctor, a longtime macrobiotic doctor, who is very well known for reversing diseases with diet in
Mhm.
Hawaii. Dr. Terry Shintani. And a
Okay.
brilliant man. He's also a lawyer, and he's also a nutritionist, MPH, Master of Public Health from Harvard. So he's very equipped, very knowledgeable. And we gave people grain, bean, and we gave them breakfast. They came to a venue that we had, and we fed them breakfast, and then we gave them a packed lunch, let them go on their way for the day, and then we saw them in the evening for a lecture and for a dinner. We did that 6 days a week. And the seventh day, they were able to do it themselves because we gave them cooking lessons and what have you. And when we did our experiment, when it ended after 28 days, after 10 days, all the diabetics, and they were on insulin. These were insulin-dependent diabetics.
Okay.
That means they had to have insulin, not just oral medication like
Okay.
metformin or something of that nature, but they had to have insulin. They were taking up to 100 units of insulin a day. All of their
Yeah.
physicians had said, you will be on insulin forever. Don't even think about getting off of it. They were not type
Oh.
1. Type 1 is a different story. They were type 2.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Type 2.
a
Okay.
common type of diabetes. But they were on insulin. All of them, within 10 to 14 days, were off of insulin. And they were shocked. They couldn't believe it. They didn't need it. Blood pressure by the third week was going down, all with diet, also movement. We gave them a little bit of
Hmm.
pedometers. They attached the pedometer to their legs. They clipped it on their legs, and they went for walks every day. They had to do 10,000 steps a day. It was dramatic for many of them, for those that did it. And mostly everybody did. But by the end of the 4 weeks, we saw people reduce cholesterol 80 to 120 points. We saw people normalize blood sugar
Wow.
levels. We saw people get off medications, especially pain medications for
So, when I
arthritis.
have a
We saw
question here,
so
I
many.
have a question here. Like type 2 diabetics, I believe have very strong cravings. I mean, you'll come across a lot of people, specifically, type 2 diabetics,
Yeah,
who cannot just control their craving, and specifically for the foods which have caused them the problem. They would want to go back and crave for the same things, right? So during this experiment, how could you work with taking control of their cravings? And that was like quite quick results that you're
yeah,
just
yeah. Good,
mentioning. So,
good
how did it
question.
all
Good
happen?
question. It was so new for them, and the information was so exciting for them. That and I was the main speaker, so and it was my
Mm-hmm.
project. I wrote, directed it, and
Mm-hmm.
I explained to them. I said, "This is an experiment. You can go live on chocolate cake after 21 days. I don't care. I want you to see the value of what you've going. Your doctors have told you you'll be on insulin forever. So what you have to look forward to is retinopathy. I got neuropathy. You got all kinds of conditions that are part of the degenerative breaking down that diabetes causes. It's really terrible. It's a horrible disease. Um,
Yeah.
and so they were motivated because we gave them information. We had a good medical team there. They said, "Oh, doctors in white coats. Oh, this must be legitimate." So they were impressed because they were willing to take that change. And after 3 to 5 days, uh, people were feeling better. They were regular bowel movement. Some guy came to class and said, "I don't like to talk about this, and I'm sure nobody wants to hear it, but I had the most incredible bowel movement today." He was so excited. He hadn't had a bowel movement like that in years, and he wanted to
Mhm.
tell everybody. So, which is,
Yeah.
it's difficult to do that.
No, yeah, I guess, I
But
mean, that's right, because once you actually feel it, go through that experience, before going through all of it, it seems quite difficult.
yeah,
But once you get hooked to feeling good in your body, then you don't want to actually go ahead and do the wrong stuff that you had been doing for years.
right. We don't want to call it wrong stuff because that sets up a good and
Yeah.
bad consciousness in people. We
Mm,
want to
yeah.
say that's a
Yeah.
little more extreme. Later, you can have that.
Yeah.
And when I draw a pie plate for people as to what percentages I recommend of different foods, I always have a little
Mhm.
wedge. I call it W um, WYW. And
Okay.
I don't tell them what it means. I just say, and then the blah, 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 and this, and also a little bit of just a little bit of WYW. And I wait, and they say, "What's WYW?" And I say, "Whatever you want." They say, "Oh, great. So I can have it every day?" I said,
Wow.
"How do you know you're going
Yeah.
to want it every day?" I said, "I need you
Yeah.
to be present in your body and see if that's a
Yeah.
craving that you have." So you have to work with people individually. But when it comes to sugar cravings, you have to understand blood sugar maintenance. It's really important that people understand regular eating for somebody that's a sugar craver is important, as well as a little
Mhm.
hot cup of tea after you eat. It kind of stops your appetite sometimes, as well as movement, as well as education, which gives you the motivation to keep on doing it. So that all of that is part of it. But here's what I wanted to tell you. I had
Mhm.
planned to go to India to do this same film because we never
Okay.
finished our film. We finished our medical experiment, but we didn't do the additional things we were going to do in the film. We had
Okay.
trouble in our production.
And
But
India, because we are the diabetic capital of the world, right?
well, only because you have so many people there. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
according to statistics, there are 75 to 78 million diabetics in India, mostly
Yeah.
middle class.
Yes.
And it's not getting better. It's
It's
increasing.
getting worse. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And if you look at traditional diet, if you look at everything that's fried and puri and all the different Indian delicacies and the
Yeah.
volume of food people eat and the inactivity, it's critical that people change. Otherwise, it's predictable they're going to get this condition. I went to India
Mm.
in 2010 to counsel this very well-known guru and who had diabetes. And it was interesting because I was thinking, all right, I'll go to the market and I'll see. I was in Chennai, and I'll see what's
Okay.
there, and I'll see what's there. I went crazy. I didn't recognize anything because there was no American green vegetables there. There was like
Yeah.
gourd, what was it called? Green gourd, that
Yeah. Green God. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
big gourd,
And
there's so many.
South India is, I mean, the vegetable content in South India is
Yeah,
quite low as compared to North India, and
uh,
Chennai is in South India.
yeah, the
So
South.
it's more about rice and the specific food recipe that most
Right.
of the South Indian people you'll come across with, which is dosa, idli, sambar. So these are the their staple food, and they can just keep eating it day in and day out every single day.
But I don't worry about
With
environment with people. I know a lot of macrobiotic information talks about what you eat, what you should eat because of your environment. I don't. I think what Osawa originally said was you eat to heal yourself, and then you eat according to what you want to do or your flexibility or whatever.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
so I don't worry about environment so much. The
Mhm.
real thing is to how do you heal, and one of the
Yeah.
things is to reduce what's aggravating you before you. I go to parties and people say, "Oh, you're the nutritional guy. What's a good diet for arthritis or something like that?" It's not what's a good diet for anything. It's what are you doing that's aggravating and or causing the symptoms or weakening immune
Mhm.
function that makes you need to change. That's really a big
Yes.
issue for people. If people go to my website, which is Verne Verona, VARONA.com, there's a
Mhm.
articles section there, and they're free downloads. You can download 10 reasons why you have sugar cravings there. So
Okay.
that
Nice.
feel welcome to do that. They're practical. I put those together based on what I've seen by clients over the years, and I've been very, very successful with clients changing. Those who wanted to change.
Wow.
You have clients sometimes who don't want to change, and
Hmm.
you
Exactly.
have to respect
So
it. You have
actually,
to.
that's my one of the questions. Like, you just mentioned that and knowing how to manage your blood sugar levels through the day, the way fluctuations can happen, not just
Right.
because of foods, but because of the environment, because of your state of mind, because of like how you're living your day throughout. But when it actually practically comes to working with a client, the only language when it comes to blood sugar, they only understand foods. I mean, the relationship that they'll try to make with blood sugar is all about foods, and they would want to do anything and everything to change in their foods to make sure the blood sugar level is controlled. But I believe it's a lot to do with your stress levels, your thought process, how you kind of work through the day. So what's your take on that?
Well, for years, one of the reasons I kind of moved away from the macrobiotic movement was because I
Mhm.
began to have a strong disagreement with the emphasis. The emphasis was an
Okay.
older emphasis on food and
Hmm.
large portions of grain, a little too much salt. And most of us, elder teachers that have been doing this for a number of
Hmm.
decades, have come to the same consciousness. A good friend of mine, Bill
Hmm.
Tarr, who teaches in England,
Hmm.
teaches the same kind of information. We do need grain. We need grain as a fiber source. We don't need a whole plate full of grain. That's an issue for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But there are other factors involved that we have to look at. And I started doing these cancer conferences and these other medical conferences that I do frequently. And I started meeting people who were really diseased. They would come, like in a cancer conference, one of the cancer conventions I used to do had 6,000 people come over a 3-day period, 6 to 7,000 people. And they would
Hmm.
always give the speakers a booth. And so you could, sell your books if you want to do that. And they'd come by my booth and they'd say, "Hi, I'm a cancer survivor." And I'd say, "Great." I said, "How long?" And they'd say, "Oh, 9 years, 10 years." I said, that's great.
Mhm.
Congrats. You have my admiration. What do you attribute
Mhm.
to it? This is what I asked everybody. What do you attribute to
Mhm.
your cancer? Now, they all changed their diets, they all changed their lifestyles. But when I said, what do you attribute to getting better? The responses were very different. They were, I got divorced finally, or
Mm.
I got married to the love of my life, or I quit
Yeah.
this job I had for 30 years. It was killing me. Or I got my kids out of the house. Now I got myself back, got my life back. Or I decided I want to be a photographer. I want to do something creative in my life, and I've been ignoring that voice forever.
Mm.
And so I put together over the years what I call the self-healing personality characteristics. And
Mhm.
that's really what I have in my cancer book, my Nature's Cancer Fighting Foods. The first 44 pages are no food at all. It's just all about what are the factors that help you heal. And some of the factors, if we're looking at the
Yeah.
traits, I'll just read these traits along real briefly. So,
Yes. Please. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
number one, a meaningful life. People who have a real
Purpose of
strong
life,
sense of
right? Yeah.
a strong sense of meaning in their life, they want to live, they want to heal, they want to get better, they want to breathe deeper, they want to be more active. They have a strong sense of curiosity. They want to learn more. They want to travel. They want to study. They want to do new things that are interesting and creative and challenge themselves. Sense of meaning is critical. Michio
So I
spoke
can just
about
add
that.
on something. Sorry, I
Yeah.
can just add on here, like,
No,
before I
feel
started my
free to
macro.
interrupt me. Wait. Feel free to interrupt me anytime. I will just go
No
on and on and
problem.
on. Okay.
No problem. I mean, I have some curious questions and some things to share, so I'll just keep doing that. So,
Okay.
when I got into wellness and macrobiotics, that was about a decade back. Before that, I was completely an IT person. I mean, I did my computers, masters in computers, and I
IT?
worked with IT. Yes, IT
IT.
for
Okay.
11
Yeah.
years. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was a software engineer precisely, and from there I, gradually shifted to what I'm doing right now. And by that time when I was in IT, I mean, there was nothing for me to complain of from the job perspective. I was at the peak of my career. I was managing my kids well, and the job was really, high paying, and everything was all okay. But somewhere inside, I gradually started to realize that I'm not at the peak of my health. I'm struggling with everything, though I'm able to manage, but somewhere I'm so fatigued, or somewhere I'm not able to cope up with how my body wants me to behave or what I want to do. And I just landed into macrobiotics by chance. And my journey started with reading this one of these books at 8 p.m. at night, and by 4 it was a 400-page book. I
Wow.
completed this book by 4 in the morning, and by next morning 4 a.m. I was clear what is my direction. And soon after, I started looking out for how I can get into it. That was the beginning, and it's still going on. I mean, I never look back into my IT journey again. Though I kept working for a few more years after that, and kept kind of studying, and then gradually moving on to learning. But what the point that I wanted to raise here was, when I was working in IT and had everything that are the modern parameters of success. Yeah,
Right.
I had so much bloating, and I was very severe high on anxiety. And there were two doctors working on me. One was working on my gut health. The other one was working on my, as a therapist for my psychological issues. And for
Right.
10 to 15 years, nobody could ever figure out, you know, how to heal this or how to heal that. I mean, how to bring that unity or uniformity in the body. And when I got into macrobiotics, I practiced it for 1 year. And after 1 year, I realized my gut issues were completely gone, and my anxieties were all gone. And that's where I realized there's so much close connect between how your gut and mind is closely related. So that
Yeah.
was like something that I really wanted to share. And then I got my purpose of life also. That's an important perspective, because I'm kind of continuing my studies till now. Now I'm studying Ayurveda. Then I studied yoga in past few years. And
Right.
so I think I have a purpose for life now. So that keeps me going. So as you
Yeah.
mentioned, your first point, I can actually resonate with what you just mentioned.
Yeah. It gives you a reason to get out of bed in the morning. So the other
Yeah.
one's having a positive mental attitude. Just it's about the second issue is perspective. People who have a larger perspective. I think my favorite story is now a friend who's an Arab told me this story. It's two sheikhs in the desert are coming from opposite ends, and they actually bump Rolls Royces, and they stop and they get out and they look at the damage, and then they look at each other and they get
Mm.
closer to each other and they extend their arms and they hug each other. And one of them says, "Isn't it wonderful that Allah has chosen for us to meet like this?" So perhaps
Mm.
fictitious, but the point is that, you know, that there's significance in everything that happens. And
Yeah.
our perspective, one of the principles I love about macrobiotic philosophy is, um, do you know, mea culpa? That's my head. I was running through the principles. Mea culpa.
Mhm.
Mea culpa means my fault. Like, how is it your
Mhm.
fault? What is your part? How are you responsible? In the US right now, we have a very contentious political thing happening between parties. And there's one party that is completely exempt from looking at anything that's wrong with them. Everything is about blame and finger pointing. Actually, both parties are finger pointing. But the issue here is that my grandmother used to say, when you point your finger, you've got three pointing back at yourself. So we need to look at our issue here and stop complaining. And positive mental attitude means not being positive by falsely saying, I'm going to be positive, but it's by having a larger perspective about things and having a more spiritualized perspective. Third thing is balanced nourishment, of course, having a way of eating that supports you, a way of eating that you're sensitized to, and that works for you. The same doesn't work for everybody, but to find out what your balance is, that's why counselors can help you sometimes.
Yeah.
And that give you a springboard for experimenting so that you can figure it out for yourself. And you can figure it out very quickly. Um, Fourth thing is a healthy lifestyle. Having products in your home that you surround yourself with that are healthy, that breathe, that are natural, having implements that you use in your eating that are natural, limiting your use of plastics and using more natural elements and surrounding yourself with that. Manageable stress. There's always stress. The state of no stress is called death. So there's always stress,
Yeah.
right? There's
Yeah.
always stress. So how we
Exactly.
manage it is what's important. And this also goes with number two, which is positive mental attitude. You're managing your stress it's also always about perspective as well. So stress is an issue because stress hormones create incredible toxicity in your body. And it's like
And I
eating
guess
sugar.
it's to do with cravings as well, right? Stress is a lot to do with cravings.
Absolutely. When you're stressed, you want to, what happens when you eat? You don't think. You're like, you watch people in a movie theater
Yeah.
eat, you watch those
Yeah.
people. I
Exactly.
love to like being in
Yeah.
a movie theater. And like, I haven't been in a movie theater in a long time, but I would be in a movie theater and you see somebody get like a bunch of candy and a soda and a hot dog and all this stuff. And you watch them while they're in the movie and it's like they're doing this. There's something very
Yeah.
animalistic.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's about numbing yourself because when you eat like that, you're not thinking. It's mindless eating is what it is. And we've all done it and we all will do it forever at some point in our life. But the real issue is that you have to understand that when you're stressed, eating takes your mind off of everything. You don't go anywhere. When you are stressed and you have something sweet, for instance, like ice cream, right? Oh, so good. You're right there. I love this. Is my favorite flavor, the vanilla. It's got nuts in it. Oh my God. You can go crazy because you're right there in the moment. You're not thinking about your rent or your boyfriend problems or your school problems or any issues that are plaguing you as a stress,
Yeah.
non-existent. You're right there in that
I guess
mouthful.
consciousness becomes the tongue.
Consciousness is right there in the tongue. So
Tongue. Yeah.
so the issue really is that, and that could be helpful once in a while, but it's not a source of dealing with depression.
Yeah.
Many of us use it as, but it's not. It's not a source of really effectively dealing with cause and effect for your stresses. So yeah, stresses will force you sometimes to have different cravings. A sense of humor is really critical because a sense of humor means the ability to be flexible, the ability to laugh
Mhm.
at yourself or laugh with
Exactly.
others. One of the things I do, I did a medical seminar about 2 years ago, and the doctor was a wonderful guy. He's an old friend actually, but he said, "Listen, I need you to be really cool with this audience. They're a very conservative audience, so don't get too far out with jokes." And I said, "Just don't worry about it. Just go sit down." So he sat down there on stage,
Yeah.
and I could see him right in the front row, and I said, they introduced me this big long introduction. Then finally I came on. They gave me a little polite clap. There's no MD after my name. name. So even though I started a medical clinic and, I lectured a physician, so they're all a little like, well, who is this guy? And so they gave me a polite clap, and I got up there and I leaned into the microphone and I said, this guy goes to the doctor and he says to the doctor, and I could see my doctor friend, he's going, oh my God. And he says, Doc, when I touch over here, I got a lot of pain. And when I touch over here, it just kills me. And when I touch here, pain. And here, pain. Doc, I'm falling apart. What's going on? Harry, don't worry, says the doctor. We're going to do some labs. We'll do an x-ray. We'll figure it out. You come back tomorrow. I'll have your labs and stuff. We'll figure out what's going on. Okay? Don't worry. Go home, relax, come back tomorrow. We'll look at all this and figure out what you got going on. Harry comes back the next day. The doctor says, Harry, you have a broken finger. So it's a joke. The point is that Harry did not have enough personal advocacy or personal insight to know everybody he was touching. It was because his finger was hurting, and it was just not a point of disease or an issue. Anyway, they loved it, and they broke. And as soon as they broke apart, it's like the air changed dramatically, and they wanted more. And my doctor friend said later, you could have stood up there and did stand-up for 20 minutes, and they would have been very happy. So we have to find a way to make
it. I guess that's an amazing, because I have been listening to some of your sessions also. And I mean, it's such a nice combination of great knowledge joined with those laughter doses in between. So, you end up simulating more.
Thank you. Sometimes I go overboard, but I appreciate that. But,
good for you. Good for you.
Thank you. So when I say sense of humor, I mean having the ability to laugh. When you laugh, you're in the moment. You know who doesn't laugh? People who are really tense. Now, when I had the clinic, people would come to see me on medical referrals. So they wouldn't know who I was. The doctor sent them. So I said, Dr. So-and-so said I should say you. And they sat there and they were nervous. And so I would say, I want to show you a picture of how I used to look. And I would take this picture I had. I went to once a clay bath, a bath, outdoor clay, a clay pool with mud in it, right? And everybody was putting mud on them. And so people were like having fun. They were making tumors on their neck and making horns. And so I did that. I made horns and I did this funny face. And I had a friend take a picture. And I took that picture and enlarged it. So I would show them this picture. I'd say, this is how I used to look. And 99.9% of people would laugh. But once in a while, I get a person, they do this. And as I show them the picture, they go, they couldn't let go. And I realized at that point that laughing, really, humor is about letting go. You have to let go to laugh, because laughing puts you in the moment. You're right there. There's nothing going on anywhere else. That's why you look so funny when you're laughing. You're making these funny faces. And if you looked in a mirror, you'd say, oh, I'll never do that again. But when you're laughing from impulse, it's a sense of it's joyous. It's like laughing clubs in India. There's laughing clubs all over the place.
Yeah.
So it's
and
very
I guess
similar.
It's not just to do with laughter is not just to do with an external expression. Your entire hormonal or the body chemistry changes when you get into that laughter mode, right? And then how the physiology works is quite different from when you're working in a tense mode.
Oh, the physiology is fascinating. What happens in your body? Norman Cousins, the doctor who wrote his heart disease recovery, barricaded himself in a room, good diet, and also watched Charlie Chaplin movies for 2 weeks, and he laughed himself to health. And he wrote a book about it. So I think in terms of laughter, it's not about being a joke teller. It's not about trying to be funny. It's just about appreciating humor. It's about being able to appreciate a story and find the humor in it or find the irony in it. It's about a sense of relaxation, being present, and that's really particularly important for people trying to heal. Also, number 7, love and friendship. Making sure you surround yourself with supportive company. I get people who have no support. I mean, I once had a woman come to see me in a session, and she was a very wealthy woman, and I said, do you have any support around you? She said, no, it's just me. I said, okay. And, as she talked more and more, I realized her life was all about her. Everything she did was about her, but she had no connections to anybody. And I said, so the first thing I'd like to recommend, I used to do a 3-part appointment. The first thing I'd like to recommend is, and I gave her a sheet of paper, and it had all these volunteer organizations. I said, I'd like to recommend you volunteer for an organization. She was insulted. She said, excuse me? I said, I'd like to
Mhm.
recommend you volunteer work for an organization. She said, I don't need to do that. I said, I think you do. I said, you're coming to see me for advice about your health. Guess what? I think you need to be around people who are less fortunate than you are in a position where you're giving to them. Try it. She walked out. She was upset. She walked out. Didn't hear from
Mhm.
her. I thought, fine. 3 months later, I got a picture from her, and it was this is not cell phone days. This is like Polaroid picture days. She sent me a
Yeah.
Polaroid in an envelope, and she had been volunteering in a clinic, and she had her arms around these people, and she said she had never grown so much as she had in
Wow.
the time she was volunteering. It caused her to want to take better care of herself. It opened her heart up. So it really, some people are more fortunate. They have a relationship or they have good friends. But for those that don't, there's all kinds of ways to connect with people. We need that.
Exactly.
It helps us look at ourselves in a very different way. Two more, three more. Emotional equilibrium, the ability to express how you're feeling when you feel disconnected. So if you feel disconnected, someone says something to you and they matter to you and you're upset, you need to not walk away and say, "Rrr," but you need to just say, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what you said, what you really meant, but I feel offended or I feel hurt that blah, blah, blah. You need to be able to talk to people without fear because
Yeah.
we are ruled by our fears in this regard. So I think it's a critical aspect of expressing ourselves. Uh, Physical exercise, movement. I was a national class runner in the 70s. I was a real serious runner, and I had a
Mhm.
really very impressive time for marathon and what have you. And I blew my knee out with running, and I was so bitter. I hadn't exercised for 10 years, and finally I thought
Oh.
this is getting ridiculous. I need to exercise, and I started biking. So for me, my exercise is biking. I love biking and dancing, but I love biking.
Mhm.
So I have a mountain bike. I live near mountains, and
Wow.
I'm over the place. But every day I'm biking, 5 days, 6 days a week. I see my health
Nice.
change when I don't. I see my health sharpen when I do. So that motivates me. People say, well, how do you bike 10, 20 miles a day? It's easy. I like the way I feel. When you start feeling different, you want to feel that way. And if you know how to change it, if you have the control where you know how to make a difference and how to make a change, it's exciting. You'll find a method, whether it's walking or running or swimming or biking, you'll find some activity that you could do. And I have some people who can't bike anywhere, and I say, get a stationary bike. You like movies? Great. Watch a bunch of movies in front of your stationary bike, but keep pedaling. And it makes a difference for them. It makes a real difference.
Do I add on something here, Amane? Like,
Yeah,
I mean, this is about, this seems like your passion where you're biking, and it actually makes you feel good, which is a very subtle aspect of you knowing your own self and knowing what is it that can, get you just going. And a lot of
yes,
people would know that what is it that they like doing, and but may not very deeply realize or feel that, okay, this is something that can actually change the entire pattern of how, or the perspective of how they look and feel, right? And it would be
right.
more or less stuck to maybe a weekly activity, or when you have time kind of an activity. So what's your suggestion to such people? Because I strongly believe that, you, on a regular basis, you need to keep doing certain things which just get you going. I mean, even if it
You have
doesn't seem important in the moment.
I agree. I agree. I think you have to find out what people have done. Like I talked to a guy the other day who's a tennis player, and
Mhm.
I said, "Why'd you stop?" He said, "Oh, all the knee jutting around and blah blah blah." I said, "What about just against the
Mhm.
wall, squash as an exercise, and challenge your serve and work on work on your slice and work on all these different aspects of tennis that you no longer do." He got really excited. Or have
Mhm.
they biked before? I used to bike when I was a kid. So, but when you run as a runner, you don't want to bike. At least I didn't want to bike as a runner. I just wanted to run. You want me to walk somewhere? I would never walk. I have to run. So, and I know a lot of runners who are like that. So, I just finally realized I was limited in terms of running anymore. I couldn't run the way I used to run. So, I thought, let me do something where I can do endurance, really test my endurance and challenge myself.
Mhm.
You have to approach it not from an exercise point
Yeah.
of view. You have to point it from a
Yeah.
point of view of challenge yourself in a bigger way. Oh, I could never do that. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. If you're
And I guess
willing
the
to
bigger
try.
factor which is missing is your ability to actually differentiate between living and feeling alive.
Yeah. A lot of people are
Yeah.
so far down, it's going to take a lot for them to do that. So you've got to be very gentle with
Yeah.
people. You've got to be you have to understand that this is a great difficulty. A lot of people hide behind food. Food is everything to some people.
Yeah.
So I think you have to be very sympathetic to that. And your
Yeah.
recommendations have to be incremental for most people.
And then
Um,
gradually exposing them to what is it that can gradually, make those shifts from food to other
Fo-
things.
folk dance, I've recommended to people folk dancing. I've recommended uh, brisk walking. In the 1890s, walking was very popular. In the late
Hmm.
1800s, they called it pedestrianism, which is an English word for movement, for walking.
Hmm.
And people had walk races, like fast walking races. And there were champions and there were marathons and all about walking. So you can walk. If you can't run, you can walk. But I like to recommend low impact stuff. So swimming,
Yeah.
uh, biking. We need that impact because impact creates
Yeah.
bone density. So that's important. But uh, we need oxygenation. That's the whole bottom line. We need to get our blood moving. You're making good blood with your diet. Get it moving. Get it moving around your body. That's like the purpose of a compress. In folk medicine, they have compresses, all kinds of
Ginger
plastic.
compress and macrobiotics, right?
I do compress. I never do ginger, but the whole point is, what is a compress? A compress is bringing blood to an area,
Hmm.
accelerating circulation in one area. That's the purpose. So what
Okay.
I tell people, I don't tell people do ginger compress because that's a great ginger. They have to squeeze it. Blah, blah.
Yeah, that quite a task.
I
Yeah.
got a life to live. I can't. So, but guess what? You don't have to do it. You get a hot water bottle. You get a hot water bottle, and you fill up your hot water bottle halfway with hot water, really hot water. This is air. Push the air out, cap it really tightly, and then you hit yourself over the head 10 to, no, I'm just kidding. You take the hot water bottle. I want to see if you were listening. Take the hot water
Yeah.
bottle and you push the air out so it's a flat bottle.
Mhm.
And now you put it under your kidneys and you lie on it. Same thing as the ginger compress. Ginger's not
Yeah.
magical. It has a nice ability uh, to to um, create a little more
Get
heat
the
on the
flow going. Get the flow
yeah,
going. Yeah.
but you could do a mustard plaster, ginger compress, hot water bottle. The whole principle of it is to bring blood to an area. So if I'm tired, if I'm in a, if I'm got to do a seminar or I'm doing something that's going to require more energy, and I've had a late night, and I know I'm going to get limited sleep, I travel with a hot water bottle. I'll put a little hot water in the bottle, and I'll put it under my kidneys before I go to bed, and I'll usually wake up in the same position. I won't even move
Oh
all
wow.
night long because it's such a deep sleep, and I really will feel
Yeah.
rested. So sometimes these things are little tricks that you can do that can help you, but ultimately it's about the larger things that you do that make a difference. The last thing
Right.
about the self-healing personality is faith. People need to develop their faith more. And the only way you develop faith, in my opinion, is not psychologically. You don't develop it by reminding yourself of information. You develop by experimenting. If you experiment and you find something really works for you, let's say you find you include a little grain every day. And if you include a little grain every day, you find that you have great regular bowel movements when you haven't had in years. You now have more faith that
Exactly.
you have conviction. You have a conviction that works for you, but that conviction gives you faith. So there are lots of forms of faith. I'm just talking about some
Yeah.
practical faith in terms of self-care, and self faith for a higher power, faith for a divine reason, faith that everything works, for a reason. Um,
Yeah.
and that's so those are aspects of it that I think are really important of the larger view, because the truth is, healing is not a dietary activity. Healing is a body, mind, and spirit activity. So
Agree.
healing means you need to nourish the body. You need to find out how to nourish the spirit in a way that's suitable for you, and you need to nourish your emotional mind, your creative mind, your intellectual mind. We it's not one thing we have to do. I've seen people eat
Exactly.
really well grain, bean, and vegetable, and they're just still messed up. So we
This is
require.
actually the mindset. This is quite, because a lot of people actually practicing dietary practices would bring about all kinds of changes required to the best of whatever can be done,
Mhm.
still are not sorted in life. Yeah, I mean, that's what, when I talk to people, like, food is not the solution for everything. If you're seeking your solution in foods, you're on the wrong path. I mean,
Yeah,
you have to see everything in the big picture.
larger context. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the idea of macrobiotics for me is making sure that I'm eating a simple diet that makes me feel good consistently. And what that happens to be is eating a portion of grain every day, eating lots of vegetables, eating greens, roots, vegetables that grow above the ground, like cauliflower, vegetables like
Hmm.
squashes, vegetables that grow deep in the ground, like root systems, carrots and onions and all the turnips, eating lots of greens, and eating in a variety of styles. You don't just eat everything overly cooked. Some cooked, some slightly raw. For me, I don't care for raw, actually. I do like a salad, fairly frequently, but I make it a very fine chopped salad. And I make sure that
Hmm.
I add something like a little bit of umboshi vinegar or some lemon juice to it, and it makes it a little tastier for me and a little easier to digest.
Yeah.
So that's, and beans. People always say, "Well, where do you get your protein?" And when they say that, they're always talking about animal
Most
protein.
common question. Yeah.
People think protein is just about animal protein, but
Yeah.
it's not. Protein is about what 2/3 of the world is eating is bean protein. So how do you get your bean protein? People don't like to eat bean protein. You know why? Because they get gas. They get gas.
Oh,
So,
indigestible. Yeah.
yeah. So what I tell people is, look, I want to tell you how you can create gas. Just so if you're bored and you have nothing to do
Mm.
and you want to create like some really bad gas, this is the best way to do it.
Best
Make a
remedy.
pot of beans,
Okay.
take a bunch of beans, take a big
Hmm.
bowl of beans, put some pineapple in there, mix it with pineapple or any kind of fruit you want, and eat
Hmm.
that. It's really tasty. You'll enjoy it, and
Uh-huh.
you'll have gas all day long. Why? Because the fruit is a
Okay.
simple sugar, and the fruit digests quickly and ferments the digestion of the beans.
And
So
I took that seriously. So
yeah, I understand.
yeah.
So yeah, so
I
it's
was just
important.
wondering, I haven't come across any
Well,
of
I
such
joke.
recipes ever, beans with
But
fruits.
if you joke with people about it, it's easier for them to understand, you know,
Yeah.
what your fears are about beans, because people are really
Yeah.
afraid of beans. And that's also when you go to a Mexican restaurant, you get beans. They'll give you a whole plate of beans. It's like that's a lot of beans. So my idea is to eat grain, bean, vegetables, some seaweed. If you want animal protein, again, that's a personal choice. I don't eat it for a number of different reasons, but I don't feel good when I eat it. So I kind of avoid it as much as I can.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel resolved about that. I don't enforce that on anybody, but if I get people who are diabetic or people who have sweet cravings, the number one thing is for a little while, stay away from animal protein and see how you do. You know what? Ultimately, what I can say in closing here is you can't change
Mhm.
anybody. You can't change
Exactly.
anybody. You got to get that. You can influence them, you can inspire them, but they have to get it on their own. And if you're going to counsel people, you have to do it in a way that sets them up for an experiment where they can have revelation as they go along and know that they can be in
Yeah.
touch with you, have questions answered. So that's
Yeah.
really how people change, is gently, slowly, and despite themselves, because they'll see the changes as they go along.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so insightful. I mean, it's been so much of information for me also to take back. And before when I actually we wind up the session, I have some quick questions if we have time. Yeah.
Yeah, please fire
Uh,
away.
yeah. Okay. So very again a curious question. It's been like 50 years, almost 50 years of practicing for you into practicing a lot of dietary things, nutritional information, science, all of it coming together. What is it? That you've learned by hit and trial or by scientific interventions, that simple tips on a daily basis from the food perspective that actually work, just cutting out all the clutter.
Well, I study science because I like to validate this information with science. So when I'm teaching or talking to a client, I'm giving them a good explanation on many different levels. So it's a well-rounded expression. So one of my teachers, Michio Kushi, used to say, if you eat dairy food, it creates sticky blood. You can't say that to physicians. That sounds like
Yeah.
craziness.
Yeah.
So, but there is a condition that happens when there's too much fat in the blood. It's called low formation. It's called sticky blood cell syndrome, they call it, or blood cell aggregation, where the cells will stick together. And when they stick together, you're not getting the oxygen that they're carrying. So you have about 1/3 of your blood oxygen diminished as a result of that. That's why you get tired after a high fat meal. So when I tell this to people, they go, "Oh yeah, I had Thanksgiving and I had all this food and I got tired." Yes, exactly. So
Mhm.
there's certain science aspects that I found. I use science as a diagnostic with most clients. When I have a client that comes to me with a number of different conditions, I make sure they have some kind of blood work so we could see chemistry, what's going on chemically. Now that's, you have to be really off for your chemistry to not to be strange, but it's always helpful to know the chemistry and you can see patterns. And when people see it on paper, it's much more impressive for them if you
Yeah.
can look at their chemistry and say, this needs to change, this is because of this, blah blah blah. So
Yeah.
I'm a great believer in that. Diagnostic tests like ultrasound, x-rays, even, I don't worry about stuff like that. People are so crazy about one x-ray radiation. you know I
Yes.
think the benefit can outweigh the danger on the eventuality, and there are
I
ways
agree.
to eat
Yes.
in a way that might, according to some research, shield us or diminish some of that radiation potentially. So that's a possibility, but uh, that's, for me, I don't hold science up as the overlord, but for me, that's important. I think sometimes supplementation is important for people if they're really deficient. I had somebody,
Mhm.
I went for years ago. I had somebody, I was waiting for them, and they said, I have to go downstairs. The phone's ringing. So they went downstairs, and when they came back up, they were, and I said, do you know your iron level? And she said, no. And I said, you need to get some blood work done. She
Wow.
went, got blood work. The next day, her iron level was like chronically, I mean, serious, dangerously low. They kept her in the hospital,
Mhm.
get her
Okay.
intravenous iron because she was so low. But her counselor she had gone to before said to her, "Oh, you're just discharging." So you have to be careful of new age lingo like that: discharging, detoxing. You've got organ systems, and I've heard one of your tapes where you talked about this yourself. You have like lungs,
Mhm.
liver, kidneys, lymph. What else do you have? Lungs, liver, lymph, uh, skin. Yeah, I just want to get them all in. So 6 major systems in your body that help discharge, that help you detoxify. You're detox as we speak. You guys out there, you're listening to it. You're detoxing right now. You're making bowel movements. You're passing urine. I mean, we are discharge
Yeah.
machines. All day long, we're
Yeah.
discharging from your skin, from your sweat. 2 million pores we have. So the idea of that, we're going to do a detox. A 3-day detox. That's
Yeah.
okay. It's fun to do, but that doesn't really mean anything because your blood actually regenerates every 100 to 120 days. It's more about 120
Yeah.
days. So if you want to really think about this, everything you've eaten in the last 4 months, even though you've discharged the matter, the physical matter, the structural fiber and what have you, through bowels and through urine, everything you've eaten is part of your blood chemistry right now. So if you want to really detox, you need 4 months of a real clean way of eating to really detox. And then your system
That makes
begins.
sense.
If you start detoxing like I did as a kid by 10-day fasts, nothing but water,
Yeah.
you let all kinds of stuff get into your system. It has value for some people with certain conditions, but sometimes it could aggravate. So that's why one of the Macrobiotic teachers used to recommend, if you want to fast, instead of doing no food, have just a little amount of food, maybe just a little grain, tiny bit of vegetable. See how that feels for 10 days. You'll see for yourself. After 2 or 3 days, you'll see for yourself. Your sleep
Yeah.
changes,
Much
clarity changes,
lighter.
energy changes. I mean, so much. You have a bowel function. So much changes so quickly. How can you not think this is a good thing? You know. So, in
Yeah.
terms of your question for me, uh, there's no one practical tip I have other than we need to change. We all can be doing better. And the
Yes.
reason to do better is not because you're doing something wrong. The reason to do better is because the planet is suffering. we're suffering, our children are suffering, and just evidence of what's going on right now with the war and what have you. Uh, people have poisoned their minds. We need really to think clearly about what we're doing and who we are, how long we have. We have 70 to 90 years here approximately. It goes by like this. You don't realize it
Yeah.
until you hit your 50s or your 60s and you think, wow, just yesterday I was 30.
True.
So
True.
there's not a lot of time. And that's why you want to eat in a way that's going to give you more sense of presence for time and not make you fragmented in your thinking and what have you. You can drink a little bit, you can smoke marijuana a little bit. I mean, everything is permissible here and there moderately, but you need to do that. You need to eat in a way that makes you sensitive so you can figure out how good that really might be for you or how good that's not for you. But you can only do that by experimenting. And that's the bottom line. Is really deciding for yourself. To do that initially, counseling is helpful to get somebody to support you, but you're really off on your own at some point, and you need to experiment. And it's fun. You make it fun.
Amazing insights.
You don't make it like a root canal. It's like this is fun. This is an experiment. This is small potatoes. You can look for larger challenges in your life. Just do this for now. So see how you feel.
Great, Verne.
That's
It was such
my
an
suggestion.
amazing, insightful session and so much to take back. Thank you so much. So, before
Thank you.
we end our session, anything, last word from your side that you would really want to, help people take
I,
back and start implementing in
in
their life?
Yeah, in summary, there's on my personal card, my personal business card. Uh,
Mhm.
I have I have a quote on the back of my card. This is my card, so it's my name, and there's the quote on
Okay.
the back. It's a quote from Jonathan Swift, who was
Mhm.
alive during the I think 1700s. He said, "May you live all the days of your life." And I love that quote because it
That
makes you
says it all.
redefine
Yeah.
what living is. What is living? How do you live? How? And I think one of the most important things for a good number of people is what are you doing in your life that's creative? And I stress this to people because when you're creative, you're not thinking about anything. You're in a zone. You're in a
Yeah.
timeless presence, and it's exciting because something is being channeled through you, whether it's photography as I do, or whether it's
Mhm.
clay making or basket making or any kind of activity that's going to be creative for you. That construction is important, and it's important to do it as frequently as you can. And the more you do that, the more sense of meaning you have. So you get out of bed and you want to do that in the morning, or you want to do whatever you have to do to get through your day so you can do that. You follow?
Yeah. Yes. I guess that's the best advice that can be, if actually people start to take it seriously, because this is where actually everything starts from, right?
Well, that's the first question I ask people when I counsel. I said, like, tell me what's important to you. Tell me what do you get out of bed in the morning for? What do you look forward to? Nothing. If somebody says that, I
And,
say,
and I'm sure the answer would be like blank answer from a lot of people, right? I mean,
no. They'll say,
people,
they'll say things, but they'll never really tell you the truth. Truth is, I don't have something. I want something, but
but
I
that
don't have.
that gets that thought process going for sure,
Yes, it
which
does.
may
And
not be there previously. Yeah.
when you recommend something to somebody, I say, look, just for now, start drawing. Take an art course. Take a online. Get an art course. Do something. That well, I don't know if I want to do that forever. You don't have to do it forever. Do it for 3 months. Do it
Yeah.
for a little while. Experiment. You know. So there's so much to do, and you know, it's the sadness, and I could say overall, I've lost a lot of people in my family to cancer. My mother, my daughter, my father, aunts and
Mhm.
uncles. I mean, endless. It's been endless. And is cancer curable? I don't know. I don't know. I've seen people who have healed themselves. So I do have faith it can be done. Can it be done with macrobiotics? I don't think exclusively macrobiotics is about healing cancer, but
Yeah.
a diet that macrobiotics is espousing of grain, bean, vegetable, a plant-based whole food diet will in fact accelerate your immune function. And that's how we heal. We don't heal aside from my book title, Nature's Cancer Fighting Foods. We don't heal by cancer fighting foods. We heal
Yeah.
by the effect that food has on our immune function. So if you're eating in
Right.
a way that weakens immunity, then it's going to be harder for you to heal. So it's important to learn this information because we're not taught this stuff, and we need to learn how to work and with this organism. Because who knows?
Right.
Who knows how long we're going to be here? You don't know.
Right. Great one. It was such
Hopefully,
a
long time.
thoughtful session, and I think
Right.
I really need to go through the session again. I mean, it's all recorded, and I'll definitely listen to it back again. I mean, so much to take back. And thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
there. It's been such a pleasure, talking to you. And I really look
Thank
forward
you.
to, maybe having
I
you in
appreciate
future
you.
as well. I mean, there's so much to ask you, and but yeah, thank you so much for being there. Thank you.
Good. Make a list of your questions. Anyway, I appreciate your time.
Yes,
Thank you for inviting me. I
thank you so
appreciate. I
much.
haven't
Thank you.
talked in I haven't talked in a couple of months, so it's been kind of fun to do something. So you take care of
That was
yourself,
all
and
perfect. Yeah, thank you
anybody
so
wants
much. Same to you.
thank you. And you put my email down if people want to get in touch with me, or at least go to the
Yes,
site
please.
so they get some free
You can just let me
downloads
know
on.
your email. I think it'll get recorded in the chat box. So, anybody
It's a
who
V.
watches this
My
will.
initials my initials
Yeah.
VV at
Okay.
my name, which is VERNE. Verne has two E's, and Verona has two A's. Often people spell Verona VER. It's not. That's Italian spelling. I'm Cuban, so
Okay. So,
VARO.com. So VV at
okay.
verneverona.com.
Is that okay? I can just check the chat box.
I'm sorry. Did you send me
Yeah.
something? I didn't. Chat box.
No, no, it's in the chat box.
Oh, UIT people are so great. You're all chat box. I don't see anything in the chat box.
No problem. So it'll be it's vv at the rate VERNE right .com.
Yes. Yes. The way you wrote it, I see it
Perfect.
now. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
VV at
Perfect. Okay.
verneverona.com. Good. Thank you for your time.
Great.
Night night.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Verne. Thank you.
Bye.